Let's get it. We're in Matthew 12, Matthew 6, Matthew 11. March 7th, Matthew 11, 20 through 30. 11, 20 through 30. Judgment for the unbelievers. Then Jesus began to denounce the cities where he had done the most of his miracles, because they hadn't turned from their sins and turned to God. What horrors await you, Chorazin and Bethsaida? For the miracles I did in you have been done in wicked Tyre and Sidon. Their people would have sat in deep repentance long ago, clothed in sackcloth and throwing ashes on their heads to show their remorse. I assure you, Tyre and Sidon will be better off on Judgment Day than you will. And you people of Capernaum, will you be exalted to heaven? No. You will be brought down to the place of the dead, for it is the miracles I did for you. If the miracles I did for you had been done in Sodom, it would still be here today. I assure you, Sodom will be better off in Judgment Day than you. Jesus' prayer of thanksgiving. Then Jesus prayed this prayer: O Father, Lord in heaven and earth, thank you for hiding the truth from those who think themselves so wise and clever, and for revealing it like the childlike. Yes, Father, it pleased you to do it this way. My Father has given me authority over everything. No one really knows the Son except the Father, and no one really knows the Father except the Son, and those whom the Son choose to reveal him. Then Jesus said, Come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke fits perfectly, and the burden I give you is light. That's Matthew 11, 20 to 30. Next is Leviticus 13. Contagious skin diseases. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, if some of the people notice a swelling or rash or a shiny patch on their skin that it develops into a contagious skin disease, they must be brought to Aaron, the priest, or one of his sons. The priest will then examine the affected area of the person's skin. If the hair is affected and has turned white and appears to be more than skin deep, then it is a contagious skin disease, and the priest must pronounce that person ceremonially unclean. But if the affected area of the skin is white but does not appear to be more than skin deep, and if the hair in the spot has not turned white, the priest will put the infected person into quarantine for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest will make another examination. If the affected area has not changed or spread on the skin, then the priest will put the person in quarantine for 7 more days. Then the priest will examine the skin again on the 7th day. If the affected area has faded and not spread, the priest will pronounce the person ceremonially clean. It was only a temporary rash. So after washing the clothes, the person will be considered free of disease. But if the rash continues to spread after this examination and pronouncement by the priest, the infected person must return to be examined again. If the priest notices that the rash has spread, then he must pronounce this person ceremonially unclean, for it is a contagious skin disease. Anyone who develops a contagious skin disease must go to the priest for an examination. If the priest sees that some hair has turned white and an open sore appears, in the affected area, it is clearly a contagious skin disease, and the priest must pronounce that person ceremonially unclean. In such cases, the person need not be quarantined for further observation because it is clear that the skin is defiled by disease. Now suppose the priest discovers after his examination that a rash is broken out all over. A rash has broken out all over someone's skin, covering the body from head to foot. In such case, the priest must examine the infected person to see if the disease covers the entire body. If it does, he will pronounce this person ceremonially clean because the skin has turned completely white. But if any open sores appear, the infected person will be pronounced ceremonially unclean. The priest must make this pronouncement as soon as he sees open sores because open sores indicate the presence of a contagious skin disease. However, if the open sores heal and turn white like the rest of the skin, the person must return to the priest. If after another examination, the infected areas have indeed turned completely white, then the priest can pronounce the person ceremonially clean. If anyone has had a boil on the skin that has started to heal, but a white swelling or a reddish spot remains in its place, that person must go to the priest to be examined. If the priest finds the disease to be more than skin deep and if the hair in the affected area has turned white, then the priest must pronounce that person ceremonially unclean. It is a contagious skin disease that has broken out into the boil. But if the priest sees that there is no white hair in the affected area and that if it doesn't appear to be more than skin deep and has faded, then the priest is to put the person into quarantine for 7 days. If during that time the affected area spreads on the skin, and the priest must pronounce that person ceremonially unclean, because it is a contagious skin disease. But if the area grows no larger and does not spread, it is merely the scar from the boil, and the priest will pronounce that person ceremonially clean. If anyone has suffered a burn on the skin and the burnt area changes colors, becoming a shiny reddish white or white, then the priest must examine it. If the hair in the affected area turns white and the problem appears to be more than skin deep, a contagious skin disease is broken out in the burn. The priest must then pronounce that person ceremonially unclean, for it is clearly a contagious skin disease. But if the priest discovers that there is no white hair in the affected area and the problem appears to be no more than skin deep and has faded, then the priest is to put the infected person into quarantine for 7 days. If at the end of that time the affected area has spread on the skin, the priest must pronounce that person ceremonially unclean, for it is clearly a contagious skin disease. But if the affected area has not moved or spread on the skin and has faded, it is simply a scar from the burn. The priest must then pronounce that person ceremonially clean. If anyone, whether a man or woman, has an open sore on the head or chin, the priest must examine the infection. If it appears to be more than skin deep and a fine yellow hair is found in the affected area, the priest must pronounce that infected person ceremonially unclean. The infection is a contagious skin disease of the head or chin. However, if the priest's examination reveals that the infection is only skin deep and there is no black hair in the affected area, then he must put the person in quarantine for 7 days. If at the end of that time the affected area has not spread and no yellow hair has appeared, and the infection does not appear to be more than skin deep, the infected person must shave off all hair except the hair on the affected area. Then the priest must put the person in quarantine for another 7 days, and he will examine the infection again on the 7th day. If it does not spread and appears to be no more than skin deep, the priest must pronounce that person ceremonially clean. After washing clothes, that person will be clean. But if the infection begins to spread after that person is pronounced clean, the priest must do another examination. If the infection has spread, he must pronounce the infected person ceremonially clean, even without checking for yellow hair. But if it appears that the infection has stopped spreading and a black hairs has grown in the affected area, then the infection has healed. The priest will then pronounce the infected person ceremonially clean. If anyone, whether man or woman, has shiny white patches on the skin, the priest must examine the infected area. If the patch is only a pale white, this is a harmless skin rash and the person is ceremonially clean. If a man loses his hair and his head becomes bald, he is still ceremonially clean. And if he loses hair on his forehead, he simply has a bald forehead. He is still clean. However, if a reddish white infection appears on the front or back of his head, this is a contagious disease. The priest must examine him, and if he finds swelling around the reddish white sore, the man is infected with the contagious skin disease and is unclean. And the priest must pronounce him ceremonially unclean because of the infection. Those who suffer from any contagious skin disease must tear their clothes and allow their hair to hang loose. Then as they go from place to place, they must cover their mouth and call out, "Unclean, unclean," as long as the disease lasts. They will be ceremonially unclean and live in isolation outside the camp. Treatment of contaminated clothing. Now suppose an infectious mildew contaminates some woolen or linen clothing, some woolen or linen fabric, the hide of an animal, or anything made of leather. If the affected area in the clothing, the animal hide, the fabric, or the leather has turned bright green or a reddish color, it is contaminated with this infectious mildew. It must be taken to the priest to be examined. After examining the affected spot, the priest will then put it away for 7 days. On the 7th day, the priest must inspect it again. If the infected area has spread, the material is clearly contaminated by an infectious mildew and is unclean. The priest must burn the linen or wool clothing or the piece of leather because it has been contaminated by an infectious mildew. It must be completely destroyed by fire. But if the priest examines it again and the affected spot is not spread in the clothing, the fabric, or the leather, the priest will order the contaminated object to be washed and then isolated for 7 more days. Then the priest must inspect the object again. If he sees that the infected area has not changed appearance after being washed, even if it did not spread, the object is defiled. It must be completely burnt up, whether it's contaminated on the inside or outside. But the priest sees that the affected area has faded after being washed. He is to cut the spot from the clothing of the fabric or the leather. The spot reappears at a later time. However, mildew is clearly spreading, and a contaminated object must be burnt up. But if the spot disappears after the object is washed, it must be washed again. Then it will be ceremonially clean. These are the instructions for dealing with infectious mildew in the woolen or linen clothing or fabric or anything made of leather. This is how the priest will determine whether these things are ceremonially clean or unclean. Finishing up with Proverbs today. Proverbs 25. Proverbs 25. More Proverbs of Solomon. These are more Proverbs of Solomon, collected by the advisor of King Hezekiah of Judah. It is God's privilege to conceal things and the king's privilege to discover them. No one can discover the height of heaven, the depth of the earth, or all that goes on in a king's mind. No one can remove the dross from silver, and the sterling will be ready for the silversmith. Remove the wicked from the king's court, and his reign will be made secure by justice. Don't demand an audience with the king or push for a place among the great. It is better to wait for an invitation than to be sent to the end of the line, publicly disgraced. Just because you see something, don't be in a hurry to go to court. You might go down before your neighbors in shameful defeat. So discuss the matter privately with them. Don't tell anyone else, or others may accuse you of gossip. Then you will never regain your good reputation. Timely advice is as lovely as a golden apple in a silver basket. Valid criticism is treasured by the one who heeds it as jewelry is made from the finest gold. Faithful messengers are as refreshing as snow in the heat of summer. They revive the spirit of their employer. A person who does not give a promised gift is like clouds and the wind that does not bring rain. Patience can persuade a prince, and a soft speech can crush strong opposition. Do you like honey? Don't eat too much of it or it'll make you sick. Don't visit your neighbors too often or you will wear out your welcome. Telling lies about others is as harmful as hitting them with an axe. Wounding them with a sword or shooting them with a sharp arrow. Putting confidence in an unreliable person is like chewing with a toothache or walking on a broken foot. Singing cheerful songs to a person whose heart is heavy is as bad as stealing someone's jacket in cold weather or rubbing salt in a wound. If your enemies are hungry, give them food to eat. If they are thirsty, give them water to drink. You will heap burning coals on their head, and the Lord will reward you. As surely as the wind from the north brings rain, so a gossiping tongue causes anger. It is better to live alone in the corner of an attic with a contentious wife in a lovely home than with a contentious wife in a lovely home. Good news from far away is like cold water to the thirsty. If the godly compromise with the wicked, it is like polluting a fountain or muddying a spring. Just as it is not good to eat too much honey, it is not good for people to think about all the honors they deserve. A person without self-control is as defenseless as a city with broken down walls. Proverbs 25. Today we read Matthew 11 through 20, Leviticus 13, and Proverbs 25. Stay blessed. Stay blessed.